what is the purpose of psychiatry? Now, it may sound like a very simple question, and we may feel we may have an answer, but looking around, I could not quite find a clear answer about what the purpose of what we do. Why do we go to the clinic every day? Why do we see people? Why do we prescribe? And for ones of us that do psychotherapy, why, right? So then I made a few searches just to sort of give a background for our limitation. And so I found, for example, on WebMD that psychiatry is the branch of medicine that focuses on the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of mental, behavioral, and emotional disorders. On Wikipedia, I found that psychiatry is the medical specialty devoted to the diagnosis, prevention, and treatment of deleterious mental conditions. The NHS in the UK says that psychiatry is a medical field concerned with diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of mental health conditions. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel there's a lack of clarity about what we do, because we focus on things, we devote to things, and we're concerned with things, quoting those three sources, right? Focus on prevention, devoted to the diagnosis, concerned with the diagnosis. So what do you do for a living? Well, I get paid to be concerned about diagnosis. Now, it's vague, and maybe it's vague because the complexity of the question. Let's give that. Let's consider that. The other thing about those statements is they involve the concept of diagnosis. Now, yeah, we are very concerned with diagnosis. Unfortunately, we have none, right? All our diagnostic criteria are syndromic and they have no scientific validity. So we are concerned with something that is yet to be proven, in a sense, which is a fair concern to have, but hardly defines what we do on a professional level, on clinical level. And then comes the expression treatment. And in the treatment, we're really falling short, as we all know. Our results are very modest, while our capability to diagnose is below acceptable because there's no scientific validity for our diagnosis. Our treatments are probably slightly better, but still fall short compared to other fields of medicine. And then we have mental conditions, emotional disorders, and which is the same as saying the diagnosis, right? And we don't quite know. We don't have a real clarity of what is a problem, what isn't. Now, again, the lack of clarity may stem from the complexity of the question. They use a lot of prevention too, and I don't really know, and sorry for my ignorance, what prevention means in the field of psychiatry, right? If you don't want to have PTSD symptoms, don't get almost killed, my son, or what are we talking about? You don't want to feel depressed, don't fall in love, don't let anybody around you ever die. What is it? Because to a fair extent, when we refer to mental conditions, a lot of us still believe we're talking about functional reactions to life events. So continuing on the question of what is it that we do, I checked a Tasman textbook of psychiatry. I like that book. And it says that, so I found this, on the flow of the text, it says, what logically follows in section 5, which constitutes the heart of psychiatry, is the discussion of psychiatric disorders. So we discuss psychiatric disorders. Well, unfortunately, we don't, right? We don't discuss psychiatric disorders. We are giving a set of criteria, and there's literally no discussion about it or no critical thinking involving that amongst most of our field. There's no discussion of psychiatric disorders. We just really are looking for a presentation. We're seeing patients and looking for criteria that would give a proper label, despite terrible overlap between the criteria. And then, just because I was mentioning Tasman, right before that phrase, this chapter starts with, this is an exciting time in the field of psychiatry. Scientific progress has expanded the diagnostic and therapeutic capabilities of psychiatry, at the same time that psychiatry has begun to play a larger role in the delivery of care to a wider population. Yeah, we do deliver care. We don't know what the hell we're doing, but we do. But expanded the diagnostic and therapeutic capabilities? Really? I don't see that, but I'm digressing. So what is it that we do? What is it that is our job? What is our job? To be concerned about things? To be focused on things? So we have a whole list of vague answers. Now, if we were to look for an answer on that regard, being psychiatry an art, it would necessarily involve some degree of agreement, right? Otherwise, I'm practicing mine, you're practicing yours, and patients are left to their own luck. But the first clear problem we would have to define the purpose of psychiatry is that even if intuitively we know what we have to do or what we're supposed to do, it's very likely that we have already mixed our means with the ends. Meaning, let me give you a few examples. It's very frequent that the means to reach an end become the end itself. I'll give you an example with medicine in general, right? So what kind of people, and this is just to explain what I'm trying to say, what kind of people would we expect to become doctors? And most of us would say something like a combination of intelligence and empathy, right? You've got to care about people, at least part of it, or a good chunk of it, right? Now, how do we measure empathy? That is impossible, right? We know that we're not selecting doctors with empathy. The task is too complex. So we abandon it and we go to the next thing, which is intelligence. Now, how do measure intelligence? And the decision was to give long tests with multiple answers to kids to check mostly their capacity to memorize. Can we assess critical thinking? And that's very difficult considering the flow of selection and demands of selection for medical schools, because critical thinking also involves creative thinking. And, creative thinking can pretty much go everywhere. And what creative thinking requires is to be exposed, right? You expose your creative thinking or your critical thinking, and you have some feedback and you learn from it or you don't learn from it, and then you expose again, because it's a search for the truth. And if you're just searching for truth in your corner, in your house, not exposing your ideas, you're probably not going to go anywhere except a bunch of cognitive mazes, right? So we have tests, basically. And when it comes to confusing the ends with the means, or means with ends, what happens is that's what we select for medical school nowadays. Good test takers. And that's it. Taking the test becomes the end. Not necessarily learning medicine, thinking through problems, taking the test. So medicine selects good test takers. And we all know that people went to medical school and nursing school because they have a lot of empathy and they really wanted to help people, right? But once they start working, once they pass the training process, the selection process and the training process, once they start taking care of people, what do they find? So, for example, medicine. In medicine, we spend something like 40% to 2/3 of our time writing notes. The means becomes the goal. Granted that the goal of billing survives, right? Because that's also, obviously, it's a goal that will impose itself. So the billing survives. But all of a sudden, taking care of the patient, understanding what's happening to a patient is just less important than writing freaking long notes. Like 70% of time at some specialties are dedicated to writing notes. And American doctors actually do notes that are longer than the rest of the world because of probably litigation. And the same happens with measures like PHQ-9, GAD-7, right? So in other words, it's very easy to lose sight of what the goals are, of what the ends are when we are lost in the means. Additionally, in our field, nobody's judged by the results. We are always judged by our records, right? So, have you asked about SI? Have suicidal ideations? Have you used the PHQ-9 and things like that? Now, it's evident, and I don't think anyone argues this, that when you have so much of that confusion, when the means become the ends, then you have so many boxes to check that those steps become roadblocks towards reaching an end, right? So, for example, I've seen people criticize risk assessment because they say, well, once you're clicking boxes and asking those questions, you think that's the task, and the task is much more complex than that. It's to really look at a person and say, wow, is this guy safe, right? But no, I said no, I clicked the boxes and it's all over, right? As if it was really like two computers talking to each other. Of course, our government plays a huge role in that regard in making us mix things up. But let's go back to psychiatry. So in psychiatry, it's very clear nowadays that our means became our ends. And what are those means? So if we think in general terms we're trying to help people, the means to do so first will be to figure a diagnosis, right? A proper description of what's going on. Unfortunately, we do a proper description of problems in DSM terms, not in reality terms. Our description of problems is not reality-based, right? It will be the equivalent of saying, I am a Yu-Gi-Oh specialist. I created a set of rules, I memorized them, I'm very good at them, right? If they apply to reality, it's of no concern. So someone comes and says, I'm depressed. You want to know things like, oh, are you sleeping? Are you eating? Are you having irritability? Are you having problems with energy and motivation? Things like that. And we covered that many times in the previous episodes. But our diagnostic effort is not directed towards reality, to say, okay, what happened? Why are you feeling like that? What in your life what is missing in your life? What are you putting up with in your life that you feel you cannot walk away? What kind of rigidity you have that prevents you to be open to change enough to move away from adverse contingencies, right? So we don't do that. And then the next step, the other means to an end will be prescribing, right? Now, the matter of fact is that those two things are now the goal of psychiatry by far over what's the word, overweights? It surpasses the need to help people, whatever helping people means, which we know it is our goal intuitively, even though ill-defined. But I cannot tell you how many times I attended supervision sessions where the conversation started with, what else can I give this patient? Give things to the patient became the end of what we do. The goal, give things. Give a label and give things. And it's so bad that once we see our results, they're terrible, we redo the whole operation, That's as good as it gets. If you get to review the diagnosis, and redo the operation. There's many results. There's many consequences, I should say, right? And the prescribing can go from a evidence-based kind of a bet to a freaking postmodernistic art. Like, it's a complete salad of drugs, and in the result of that, and that reflects, because that becomes the end, then that also motivates people doing research, good or bad, with or without the influence of pharmaceutical companies, because we don't have any other paradigm where we review things and say, dude, we shouldn't be prescribed. I tried you 5 antidepressants, 2 antipsychotics. You're still miserable. I don't think drugs are cutting. We got to remove the drugs. We never do that. It's never an option. Why? Because prescribing became the end. So you're going to find research saying that everything is good for everything in psychiatry. Every single drug is good for every thinkable diagnosis. It's just like your grandma's tea, right? Grandma's tea would cure any malady. Now we don't make grandmas as we used to anymore, so now I think it's pot. Pot cures everything. Marijuana cures everything. It's the new grandma's tea. I wonder if someone has a grandma that gives you pot when you feel sick. If we look past those limitations and misconceptions, and we try to put into words the goals of psychiatry, what would that be? Now, you're going to notice that the title of this episode is The Purpose of Psychiatry, Part 1. I have no clue what the Part 2 is going to be. I'm really counting on you helping me with this. Email me at info@nepmi.org and share your thoughts freely, okay? Why? Because we haven't done that yet. I haven't found a proper core. I'm pretty sure someone wrote something somewhere, someone was thinking about it. It needs to catch, right? If it doesn't catch, we're in bad shape. So feel free to email me. Sorry, my phone went off. Feel free to email me your thoughts in that regard, and we can exchange some messages. And based on that, I'm having some high hopes that I'm going to build a part 2 for this discussion at some point. But let's continue for now. So could our goal be relieve suffering? And I would say probably not as a top goal, right? And I say that for a few reasons. The first one is that suffering has a role in our lives. And if you want to learn more about it and you haven't yet, listen to my interview with Dr. Paul Andrews. Pain fuels change, or depression fuels change, something like that. It's a good point, and it's really, it's hard to question the fact that pain leads to movement, right? Literally and emotionally as well, right? Now, it could be part of our goals, right? It could be means to an end to relieve excessive suffering, but it's probably not our end goal. So, for example, I'm particularly happy, just to explain that point, I'm particularly happy to live in a world where opioids and benzos and nicotine and alcohol are available, to placate my suffering when I need it. Those things are, however, particularly helpful to placate acute suffering when you cannot get rid of it, and for not too long. Even then, it has serious implications. If you see, for example, that if you are taking benzos and you go through some trauma, there's data that suggests that your chances of developing PTSD are higher, even if you use benzos right after a traumatic event, right? Because it seems that the things that the brain goes through need to happen. So when you suppress that, it's just like when we say nobody questions bereavement, right? Unprocessed bereavement. Oh, what processing means. Dude, I do not know, but I know that when I work, for example, with substance users, addictions, I would have people that will be like on a freaking bender for 4 or 5 years, and in some point in this 4 or 5 years, like 2 years ago, they lost their mother. And when they finally sober up, they start crying the loss of their mother, right? So there's something that needs to be experienced here, which leads to more questioning, but I'm going to kind of take it easy. How about chronic suffering? Can we use those drugs for chronic suffering? Is that placating chronic suffering could be our goal? And that also leads to a lot of concerns, right? Because that will mean that we are providing an escape from reality on a chronic basis, just like I gave an example. Also, if we consider that suffering is a result of being a human in contact with reality, plus verbal behavior. And if you want to understand more about how suffering stems from the fact that we talk, you can either read Hayes, you can read Freud. They have that explained very well, why, to understand why talking to ourselves prolongs our suffering. It's because it makes us rigid, in a sense. But I'm not going to go there now. But we would be providing escape from reality on a chronic basis if that was our goal. And in that regard, it's very hard to compete with all the things we already have providing escape from reality, like a drug dealer does a much better job, television, video games, gambling, pornography, even politics. In that regard, we don't need a medical science or art. We're not needed. But that seems to be what our medications do, to a fair extent, if not completely. Because if suffering stems from our relationship with the world, then we are using medications to induce a desirable impairment. When is it desirable? Well, when is desirable is answering the question, when is desirable is the purpose of what we do as well, right? And so, using medications chronically, we have seen the results of that with opioids and benzos, for example, and every time you turn around and you look for effects of chronic use of psychiatric medications, you find more bad news. So what I'm trying to say is we need something better to justify our existence, something that we can do with our means, something grounded in reality and able to embrace the complexity of living as a human being. And if we let's just entertain the complexity of this question for a second. And if we do so, there's this whole bunch of possible answers that come up. And I haven't seen them summarized, and I'm counting on you guys to help me for part 2. So we could say, for example, if someone is having low mood or hearing voices and cannot do the things he wants to do, we could call the purpose of psychiatry recovery. I don't know, right? We could also define it maybe in general as pursuing quality of life. And then, quality of life in what parameters? And I would say, probably biological. And when I say biological, I'm not just talking about food and shelter and, proper temperature and water. When I say biological, I'm talking about the whole gamut of emotional experiences we have that stem from possibly our evolution, right? So, for example, it would include what I spoke before on a previous episode called Try This Real Diagnosis Instead of DSM, meaning you look to a patient's life and you say, what is missing here? And I use the frame of positive psychology. So positive emotions, engagement in life, relationships, we need them. It's a real need. Solitude leads to a lot of problems, including insomnia, including depression, right? Feeling down, unable to sleep. The sleep is a very interesting thing. I want to talk about it at some point, but it seems that every time you have a need that is not attended, your sleep gets impaired, and that also includes, and we have at least data hints to suggest that that is true, that solitude leads to insomnia for most of us. How about self-awareness? I don't know if self-awareness will be a goal, means, or both. I really don't know. Someone could summarize what we try to do as personal growth, but I don't think that is the rule in our field. Recently, I saw a post on LinkedIn from a nice guy. He's a good guy. We had our frictions before via posts, right? But he said that basically psychiatrists have 3 jobs. It's start a medication, increase the medication, switch or augment the medication. That's the psychiatry that we do nowadays. Now you're going to say, well, Rod, that conversation went nowhere. And this is true. It didn't go anywhere, right? The things that I suggested so far are awfully ill-defined. But the task is because I'm really in over my head. This is a very difficult task for me to do alone. But it's this kind of questioning, if brought to the clinical context, okay, and presented to your patient, as part of the core, the question, what am I doing here for you? Unanswered, okay, but first of all, if you start doing that, it's going to make you very surprised on how the relationship, how the therapeutic process is going to develop itself. I assure you. Tolerate the unknown, the uncertainty, bring it to the question, I'm not sure what I can do for you, I'm not sure what we are doing here, what are the goals? As opposed to assume that the goal is not to feel. Why do I say that? Because this kind of questioning is already better than what we do right now. That is symptom suppression. Now, when I say symptom suppression, I'm not using suppression in a particularly psychoanalytic way. I'm really just saying that our medications are not treating anything, they're not fixing anything. We're just trying to silence experiences. I don't think you can question me on that. Our meds are silencing experiences. We're silencing moods or emotions. We're silencing perceptual things. We're silencing thoughts. We're trying to silence thoughts. We're trying to reduce intensity of behavior, so to speak, right? And that's in that sense I use suppression, symptom suppression, behavior suppression. But if we consider that those behaviors are pretty much what makes us humans, we are really trying to suppress humanity from a philosophical perspective. So bringing this question to the clinical work is already better and will help you look to goals instead of focus on the means, that is giving drugs and labels. I think you're going to have the same experience that I have, that is a much more richer, let's say, results for your patients and for yourself, okay? Then I just want to wrap up with this. Someone that I respect tremendously professionally, and I learned a lot from this person. I asked her, what is it that we do? She works in the field, and she said, what we do is we lead people on a journey. Now you're going to say, wow, we lead, right? We are leading. Come on, like, be humble, right? And I would say, yes. If you knew this person, you know why it came out like that. It's because this person is one of these, this very charismatic, full of energy and light people. We all know one or two maybe because they're very rare. Being their presence feels different, right? They give you their undivided attention, and they are sort of this mindfulness masters. No matter what they're going through, they have this sort of a solid. I was always very attracted to people like that through my life. This solid existence. You gravitate towards them, right? And I see the results of the work of this person. I have seen for a few years now. In every sense is absurd. It's really way above average. So that will, just to give you context. And then this person continued this conversation saying, what gives us a rich life? It's to experience lots of emotions. And added, because experiencing emotions means experiencing a lot of things, because emotions are this sort of a physiologic mirror of what you're going through, right? And I was going to talk about something else, but I'm going to skip it. No, I'm going to go there. So Taylor Swift came on the conversation, right? And I asked this person, why do you think, because Taylor Swift has some lyrics that are so intense about love and passion and being hurt and things like that. But a lot of our audience are like young kids that haven't been there yet. I know that firsthand. So I say, why do you think so many kids like this thing? Why do they listen to it? What is it, this thing, without having any lived experience about it? And her version was that kids want the Cliff Notes version of what I would call the cheap version of what the emotional experience of what living is, right? And poetry has this property of amplifying what we feel to make it clear for us, while our prescribing probably does the opposite. So basically, her take is that youth wants the emotion without feeling vulnerable to someone when it comes to love, for example. So it's like the cheap version, right? And alternatively, I suggested, well, maybe we are designed for intense emotions. Maybe we are designed for those things because they played a role in our survival. If you are an evolutionary psychologist, or if you adopt evolutionary psychology as a framework, but also you can find on the Bible, if you don't, about our emotional intensity. So maybe we're designed for that, and that allows pre-teenagers, sorry for that, I'm a foreigner, to experience, to have a nostalgia for something they have never lived, but it's because we have a design for such. Why does that matter? Because if living emotions intensely is a need, we should definitely review the goals of what we do. What is the purpose of psychiatry? So again, I'll be waiting for your emails at info@nepmi.org. Share your thoughts. I don't care the size of the text. Trust me, I will read it, get back to you. And thank you for listening.